Okay. Oh, I'm so excited, Elliot, to have you here today. Have a dad on the podcast here for this family legacy series that I'm doing. So thank you for coming today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Sarah. Looking forward to the chat.
Yay! So yeah, for everybody listening, like Elliot and I don't know each other very well. And so basically I spotted that Elliot was doing some fantastic stuff, supporting dads, and has a program out recently as well. So let's start by talking about your program. Tell the listeners what it's about. What it's about.
Yeah, so it's called Becoming Dad. It was on BBC One in the Southeast on the 26th of January. Now it's on the iPlayer now. And yeah, Becoming Dad, it was, wow, what can I say about the program? It was a real interesting experience, filming a documentary, and a very emotional experience as well, actually, because it delves into the reason why I'm doing my work, basically around my daughter's birth and our experiences after. It follows me as I talk to my own dad about what it was like for him being a dad when I was young and my sister was young. I talked to other expectant dads who are expecting babies, who have their own, challenges to contend with as well. And I also talked to the authorities. I talked to people in charge of midwifery in the NHS and government in terms of early years as well. So yeah, it's all about raising awareness of dad's mental health and some of the challenges of modern fatherhood around balance, work-life balance, society's attitudes and stereotypes, and gendered parenting roles. So yeah, really, really powerful program, very emotive, informative. And I'm just so happy that it's out in the world for people to see and to watch.
Great. So what inspired you to create it?
So the program, it all started really from our book. So we've got a book that, if you can see the visuals, you'll see it's called Dad.
Oh yeah, I can see it there. Dad. There you go. So they're watching on YouTube, you'll be able to see that. If you're listening, well, we can put links in the comments so you can key into those things.
Yeah. So the book is I've always got a book within about 2 meters of my person. There's a book somewhere. It's in my bag. It's at home. Like, there's always a book around. But yeah, the book we released last year. We published it last year on the 1st of June. And that really kind of did loads for amplifying the work we're doing. The work we're doing hasn't changed, but I think the book coming out and raising awareness changed. And so the way the documentary happened was that the book made its way to the BBC staff room in the head office, and the producer called Zach Adesina, he produced and directed the show. He got in contact with me like last June and was like, wow, I've read your book and I've seen the work you're doing. These issues need a bigger platform, and we need to be talking about this stuff more widely, because it's unbelievable to think that now in 2022 there isn't a show like that. There isn't a show that explores dad's mental health and modern fatherhood and those challenges. It doesn't exist. So it's one of those things where we came together. We wanted to create something really powerful that not only told my story and the work we do in music, football, fatherhood, but actually just gave a really good, true representation of the wider stuff, the wider issues. So for me, it was like, I felt a lot of pressure actually, because, we partner, or we know, and we work with loads of different community organizations who do work around parenting and that sort of stuff. And so for me, I felt a big responsibility to make sure that when they see this program, they can say, yes, that's something that truly represents our work, and that's something that I can then go and share with others like yourself, you could watch it and say, actually, this is something that I'm proud to then pass on to other people. And so I felt quite a big pressure to make sure it was something that actually was a good piece of TV. But yeah, I think we achieved that. It came out really well.
Great. Well, that's great. And so for people who don't know your story, so haven't read your book, haven't watched Becoming Dad, which I'm sure lots of people will be going, oh, I need to go watch that now. can you share a little bit of like a little taster of your story, or the thing that inspired you to start this work with music, football, football, fatherhood?
Yeah. So yeah, it was all born after when I was like 30, 31, I was definitely broody. I was ready to be a dad. I don't know if that's a thing with men if they get broody,
Do you
but
know
yeah, I was
it
broody.
is? But do you know, you're talking about this now, but like people don't talk about that much. You know, or in my experience, maybe I just don't hang out. Well, to be fair, I probably just don't hang out with dads. But you know, it's nice to hear you talking about being broody. It's definitely a thing, you know, for women for sure. But it's nice to hear you talking about, you know, being broody as a man.
Yeah, so being broody, like being ready to be a dad, basically.
Yeah.
Having lived so much, traveled, done everything I wanted to do, and seeing dads in the park with their kids, I was like, I'm ready for that. I want that. So
yeah.
So and my wife was as well, not just me. So we
all broodiness going on in your
all
household.
Yeah, it's everyone's. So we conceived and went for the pregnancy, and that was all pretty smooth as pregnancies go, to be honest. Like, it was a very smooth pregnancy. And then but the birth was very, very difficult. So my daughter contracted group B strep, which is a bacterial infection that a lot of women will carry. 20% of women will carry it in pregnancy. My wife had the antibiotics during birth, but even with the antibiotics, my daughter still contracted group B strep, which meant that when she was born, she was lifeless. She wasn't alive, essentially. She was grey, and they had to resuscitate her. There was one doctor with a straw down her neck, like sucking fluid out, and doing CPR. And on the other side, there was my wife had lost loads of blood, so they were working on that. So yeah, we spent very, very difficult. We spent 2 weeks in the hospital in NICU. My wife was being treated for her stuff. My daughter was in NICU. Luckily, I managed to get a room, so we all lived in the same room. So we spent over 2 weeks in the hospital.
Yeah,
loads of ups and downs. Just as we thought we were ready to go home, my daughter developed this bump in the back of her head, just randomly. And that's when the doctors, we were worried before that, but the doctors were very worried. They thought it might have been a brain tumor and stuff. So that night before the MRI scan, the next day, so they could find out what this thing was, easily the most difficult moment of our lives.
Yeah.
In that room, just crying. We'd been so strong for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
We felt like we were finally ready to go home, and then this happens. So really, really difficult. Crying, praying all night. MRI scan. Thank God it was all fine and we could go home. It was bone structure. So finally went home. But yeah, as it is in the UK with 2 weeks paternity leave.
Yeah.
For me, my paternity leave was finished. Basically, I had a few days left and back to work. So it was sort of like, it was really weird. It was like leaving work on the Friday, the Saturday going into the hospital because contractions had started, spending 2 weeks in the hospital, coming home, having a weekend, and then back to work. So it kind of felt like a weird experience where back to work and everyone's like, "Oh, how are you?" And I was like, didn't even know where to start. So I didn't start. Do you know what I mean? And didn't really tell people that, I just spent 2 weeks in the hospital and then came back and, hadn't processed what had happened, hadn't accepted, understood. My wife now has postnatal anxiety. She doesn't want to leave the house. We're super paranoid about my daughter. We're going to A&E every week.
Yeah, you've just experienced this massive trauma, Yeah.
And then you're back into work. And the expectations, I think for dads, also the expectations is, you get a couple of weeks grace with a newborn. And then after that, people always expect you to get on with it. So it was kind of just getting on with it, really. But yeah, so basically I was experiencing a lot of flashbacks and nightmares and anxiety. After 6 months, my daughter had a severe allergy to wheat. We didn't know that at the time, but she had a severe allergic reaction. So back in the hospital, and I think that was definitely the point where it was everything that I hadn't dealt with before kind of hit me at that moment. So yeah, I had time off work and whatnot, and eventually I diagnosed with PTSD, which at the time I was like, I didn't know PTSD was even a thing around childbirth.
Yeah.
I thought it was just something that happens to war veterans,
Uh-huh.
But yeah, now I know a lot more. And I speaking to loads of dads now who experience like similar things. It's so common. Not only is traumatic birth common, but the lack of support for new dads.
Yeah.
I think there's only recently is there been some screening for dads that have been through traumatic birth or have had previous mental health conditions. That's a new thing in the last like 2-3 years.
Yeah.
When my daughter was young, I say it was ages ago, 2015, but back then there was nothing to support the dad. The only conversation I had was more about was I domestic violence? Was I abusing my wife violently? That was the only kind of time that I was involved in the conversation or considered. So yeah, now I know it's very, very common. Lots of dads have experienced the same thing. So yeah, I think for me it was that experience where I felt like, I needed space to just write about this. I started musicfootballfatherhood.com, because that's the 3 things I love. So I started that website, started writing, and then more and more dads over the years kind of got on board. We had some really big media coverage. I wrote an article for The Independent that was shared like 30,000 times in 2 days. That was in 2017. And then we just kept on growing really, and now we've got a team of 20 kind of writers and contributors. We have a social media manager, a website editor. We do partnerships with football clubs called Extra Time, where we have conversations about dad's mental health and masculinity. So we worked with QPR. We've got Brentford coming up, Chelsea, Arsenal. So they're amazing events. We do online events as well called The Lodge. We've got one on next Monday. They're themed monthly sessions. So every month is a different theme. Next one is about healthy relationships. We also do our podcast called Daily Debates. We have a blog. So yeah, we do loads of work around content and community, all about open conversations about fatherhood. Basically. And our book is a collection of 20 stories. 20 dads from our community have written and shared in the dad book. So yeah, that's kind of my story in a nutshell, and why I do what I do and why I'm so passionate about it.
Yeah. Wow. And I suppose one of the things that came up as I was listening to you, I did wonder, where people can get support, because obviously I know there wasn't support, and it sounds like you're doing a lot in your area as well, and you have some online stuff. Where else would you recommend, do you think, for someone who's kind of going through a similar experience, or realizing, because I suppose when something happens, like you experienced a traumatic birth, or it's often later that people realize they're struggling, or when you went back to hospital, and then it all comes back, and you realize how much you are kind of dealing with or struggling with. It's interesting, because it makes me think of my husband, and because we had I suppose a traumatic experience with our first child, because our first child was stillborn, and so we had that whole thing process that we went through, and it's so interesting as a woman birthing, which I've done 3 times, that you're in it and occupied and really in it, but it must be a different experience being observing and supported in that observing and supportive role, that you must see other things as well that maybe you didn't want to see, right? So I wonder what you would recommend for somebody who's realizing, actually I could do with some support.
So yeah, I think there's different levels to it. I mean, we are more peer support,
right?
So we're for people who just want to meet other dads, want to have a chat, and that's sometimes what people need. That's what a lot of people need, to be honest, just to meet someone else who they can share with, and listen to other people as well, and just know that, okay, there's someone else experiencing something similar, or this is how they do things in their household, or this is how they've got through whatever they experienced, so we are definitely the peer support. And there's different there's different organizations. There's Andy's Man Club, quite good.
Yeah.
There's Dads in Mind. I think they're around in the Midlands. There's Leeds Dads in Leeds.
Yeah. I'm familiar with Leeds Dads.
Okay. Dad La Soul in like Brighton. So a lot of them, they do online stuff, but a lot of them are regional as well. So I think, in most areas you'll find regional stuff. But I think in terms of obviously professional support, I think it's really important to signpost people to professional support if they need it, or if you think they might need it. It's more serious. And there's loads, there's the NHS talking therapies, there's Mind, there's Calm. So there's loads of charities where you can get free help and support. For our peer support is more about, dad to dad stuff. And a friendly ear and facilitating conversations to just share. And a lot of the time, when I think about my own experience as well, is that things escalate, don't they? And without sometimes you need professional support straight away, but sometimes you just need the peer support. And if you don't get that peer support, and a lot of men don't have that in their friendship groups, because for traditional ideas about being a man and masculinity and whatnot, like we're not generally very good at opening up to our friends. So we don't have that peer support structure that a lot of women may have, more naturally. So then they just don't talk to anyone. And sometimes they don't know about the professional services, or maybe it's too daunting to call the NHS, or maybe they feel like, wait a minute, I don't want to be labeled, or I don't want a mental health thing on my record. So it's just a bit daunting for some people. So they don't actually get that support either. So then they don't get any support, and we know the suicide rates. We know suicide is the biggest killer of men under the age of 45. 3 out of 4 suicides are men. For me, it's very stark that we are we're much less likely to seek help, but more likely to take our own lives. So I think it's about having more places for peer support and trying to challenge beliefs and bias internally in ourselves and also society as well. So we can understand that it's actually okay within our friendship groups to have those kind of conversations, So I do a lot of talk. This morning I was just doing a talk actually at I won't say the company's name, but a big accountancy firm. So I was doing an online thing with them, and the session was all about, it's called What It Means to Be a Man in 2022, allyship, equality and masculinity. So half of my time is spent, running MFF with the team, and the other side is doing like corporate talks and stuff like that. And talking in that session about what it means to be a man, and traditionally that has meant certain things that doesn't include having open conversations with your friends about your challenges. So trying to get men to think differently about that, so there's a lot to do, but I love the work I do. I feel really privileged to be able to do it, to be honest.
It's great what you're doing, and that it's sparked from from your experience, but also your passion for bringing something that was missing to society and to people and to dads, with there being a gap, and that peer-to-peer part is massive, because I think people immediately think of support as being professional help, like some kind of professional help. And I know one of the things that was massively helpful for my husband and I, when we were going through our introduction into parenthood, which was a very challenging one, a big part of that was peer support, being able to be with other like-minded people. Well, it's not even like-minded, it's just other people who've been through a similar experience, because our experience with stillbirth, it affects loads of people, from all walks of life, and it's the same with what you're talking about. People become parents from all walks of life, and we all need that kind of that support, and that and like you say, with men particularly, and the suicide rate, I didn't realize it was 3 in 4. That's huge, isn't it, in terms of suicide, and this traditional view of feminine and masculine roles, and men having to be strong and not talk about their emotions, and you know, the other end of the spectrum, devaluing women being able to actually express their emotions, and you know, and making that wrong. And actually it doesn't help anybody, does it? It doesn't help women, and it doesn't help men.
It doesn't help anyone. Yeah, I think it's about trying to, like, you know, break down ideas about how you should be, basically, and just allow yourself to be yourself. Like, just allow yourself to be you. And even for me, like, it's taken me a long time, you know, to get to this point. And it's so funny, actually, because, you know, I used to work in D&I before. I was the head of D&I delivery at the Treasury. That was my last corporate job. And so that's quite a, you know, respected job in a respected establishment. You know, so to tell, like, my parents and other people that I'm leaving to write books and talk about dad's mental health and masculinity, you know, it wasn't so easy just to be like, oh yeah, I'm just going to do this thing, which is in itself is not a masculine thing to do, you know. And even sometimes I'm doing my talks and my wife's like, you know, she'll walk past or listening, and I think if she wasn't so open to me doing this stuff, then I just wouldn't do it, you know. If I didn't feel that she was still gonna respect me and see me as who I am and all that sort of stuff, then I wouldn't do it. So I think it's interesting. It does take, you know, we can't expect men to do this on their own. They do need allies, men and women, to be allies, you know. And a lot of stuff, like even this morning when I was doing that session, we were talking about how do you, on a very practical sense, if someone comes to you with something and they want to open up to you about a challenge or something they're going through, like, how do you respond to that? You know, because we as men, we're not even sure how to respond, let alone how to talk. We don't know how to receive that and what to do with that information, and how to just be the listening ear. I think through my work now, I do it all the time, so I've had a lot of practice. But I even remember at the beginning, there's Alec, who wrote for our book. He lost his wife during childbirth.
Oh wow.
And, you know, he talks about, he had one son, and his second son was being born. He left the hospital. His wife passed, and he left home to be a single dad to 2 boys. And I remember when I started MFF, he got in contact very early on. And when he told me on the phone, like, I felt like I was completely out of my depth. Like, I didn't know what to say to him. Like, literally, I don't think I said anything. Like, I think I was just froze, and I didn't know. It was on the phone. I remember it. I didn't know what to say, and I didn't know how I should be in that moment. And I was probably super awkward. And, you know, and I think over the time you get to understand, like, how to have those conversations. And how to receive someone telling you something like that. Because that's the thing, like, you know, if we're really open with our friends and with people in general, like, people go through some hard times, you know what I mean? Like, they're gonna come to you with some stuff that's not comfortable, or, you know, is difficult to hear. But it's about, how do you have that conversation, you know? So we speak about, it's not about you, not making it about your own emotions. Not thinking you have to jump to advice when actually you probably don't have the advice they need, and they don't even probably want your advice. They just want you to listen. Not to be dismissive and tell them it'll just be okay, you know, stuff like that. So it's taken me years to learn all those things, and now I'm, like, very comfortable having very conversations that I think some people would shy away from, because it can be quite devastating and you don't know how to be. You know, I had we did a podcast last year with a guy called Matt, whose daughter was run over in a car accident. She was 11 years old in Coventry. This happened in 2020.
Wow.
And so we're talking, and, you know, he's in tears and we're speaking, and I'm just thinking, like, for me, this conversation's not about me. Do you know what I mean? It's not about
and you know, and it's huge, isn't it? It is so huge being able to do that. It really is. And, you know, your experience, that's one of the gifts from the experience that you've had, and all this incredible work that you're doing has come out of that, which is just phenomenal. You know, I can so relate to what you're saying, you know, having been in a peer support situation myself. So I ended up becoming the chair of Lead Sands, became a befriender.
Okay,
And
cool.
then so similarly supporting people, listening, and actually the parenting work that I do, the fundamental foundations of it all, of any communication, actually is listening, is being able to actively listen. And the things you were talking about, it not being about you and not feeling like you've got to give advice, you've got to being there, being present, and like you say, receiving is massive, and is transformational. Like I had a parent the other day with who this really clicked for, and she was like, I felt like a rubbish mum because I didn't have any advice. I didn't know what to say, so I didn't say anything. And actually, in the saying of nothing, the transformation happened, because then her daughter came back to her because she was really upset and she felt rubbish because she couldn't make it better and she couldn't say the right things and she couldn't give advice, right? But then her daughter came back and was like, thank you so much, I feel so much better. And she was like, I thought I was failing, and actually she wasn't. She was listening, and that's what a daughter needed,
Yeah.
And
sometimes with men, we're quick to try and jump to the advice.
And
that can put people off. Like, I know, like for me, my mum always say I'm very stubborn, right? Like I didn't like when I was younger to listen to people, probably my parents, but yeah, in terms of but that's the reality in terms of taking advice. And it's a funny thing though, because I was having a conversation with someone the other day actually about men taking advice and how that can be seen as, it's sometimes not, but it can be seen as demasculating, and kind of like taking advice from another man means that you're not a leader anymore, that you're being told what to do. Like, it's a difficult thing for a lot of people to receive. And so I think in being open to hear and listen, it's being aware of that and being aware that actually in this moment, me giving advice is probably not what they need, what they want. And also we don't actually have advice for a lot of challenges that people are facing. Like, especially if we haven't been there is no advice. And also just the whole thing of being dismissive, as I was saying before, saying it's all right, like just kind of like praying over it, like it's okay, it'll get better, or like that's not helpful either. But I think these are all things that are quite difficult. It's not easy to learn this. Like, this is something that I think we have to get better at. I don't know if there probably are like active listening courses. There definitely are.
Absolutely. Well, what I'm doing right now, in March, I have a foundational course called 4 Steps to Help Your Child Manage Their Big Emotions. And basically it's about listening, and it's taking people through different ways of listening in order to help their children, so people who are, their children will be having tantrums or meltdowns or overwhelm or outbursts, however you term it, whatever terminology you use, it's for that, right? But it basically, what it is being able to receive their child and hold space for them to acknowledge, experience the emotions that are coming through, allow them to be expressed and move through. So it's pretty much what we're talking about here as well. It's like being able to be in that place of active listening, being in that place of being there for another human being without any judgment, without trying to fix or anything, but just be present for them and trust in that process as well. So yeah.
I did it the other day actually. I had to take my daughter out of school because she was being isolated and alienated from some of her friends. And she was kind of like having those tantrums for a good couple of weeks and not sleeping, and we just didn't know what was going on. It was just like, this is a whole different child, like what's going on. She eventually, because it was weird actually, because on the way to school we were already late. I was trying to get her shoes on and whatnot, and I was just saying to her, like, like what's going on, like, like kind of talk to me. And she kind of just let it all out, and we were about an hour late for school, but I was like, you know what, it's okay, because
this is important
stuff. Doesn't matter if you're late for phonics today. Like, we need to hear this. But I think even as a parent with your child, isn't it, it's potentially even more difficult, because 99% of the time, you're the fixer for them, and you're the one that's
it.
charge,
And that's one of the first things I do. I take people through, well, what's the default way that we tend to deal with these things, right? The advice, the reasoning, all the things that we do, that instead of helping and making things better, it just adds fuel to the fire. It actually has the opposite effect to what we think. We think it's going to help, and it doesn't. But having like a process to go through is helpful, I feel, which is why I love doing it. It gives people a process, that you can learn and that you can do, because it's really actually simple, but it's not easy. Like you were saying earlier, it's not easy to do the active listening when we've got all this stuff going on. It's like we have to get ourselves out of the way of it.
Yeah. That sounds great. We should definitely get you into one of our sessions to do that, I think, if you're up for it. And
I'd love to
come and talk to some dads about that, because I think that's something that a lot of people would value, myself included, but a lot of people would get a lot of value from when it comes to all relationships, but parenting especially.
I mean, it affects all relationships for sure, and partners as well, so but do you know, there's something came up. I was thinking when you were talking and the conversation went off. I'm sure it'll come back to me, but I was like, I must remember to ask this question. And then, of course, I've forgotten, because we got into all the juice of all of this,
It's really interesting, though, because I don't think I've spoken on a podcast about specifically listening and allyship and receiving someone, so it's a really interesting area to get into.
And it's a key part of what you're doing, actually, isn't it?
It is, I think and it's so weird how it all started, because there was no big plan at the beginning. Like, there was no business plan, there was no big aim. It was literally just like, I feel like I want somewhere to share for me. Like, it was very self-serving at the beginning, but over time, other dads got involved, and I think over the time I've had to work on myself. And I think having a background in B&I has helped, because a few years ago I was the head of race equality in DEFRA. So I spent most of my days doing different strategy stuff, but also facilitating a lot of workshops. So over like a 2-year period, I think we did about 150 of these workshops around race, and they were like 2.5 hours long. And that was just training. That's training for facilitation, conversation, listening, controlling an environment, not controlling in terms of telling people what to say, but control to making sure it's a good experience for everyone.
It's that kind of holding space, I call that, holding space for the conversations to happen.
So that's that is training. That's like military training. Because there were some days where I just was not in the mood. I had a headache, or my daughter had the steps, whatever the reason, I'm just not in the mood to talk about race at work today. It's in the diary, I can't cancel it. So you have to go to work, you go into a meeting room, there's between 15 and 25, 30 people that you haven't met before, or maybe you've met once, and you don't know who they are, what opinions they've got, where they are, anything, and you've got to facilitate this conversation, so that is that was big training. Definitely.
Oh, well, look, it's been amazing to chat with you today, and we've been on for quite a while, so I kind of feel like I should wrap this up. And I think the thing that I was thinking I was going to kind of dive a little deeper into was the masculinity part, but we have really covered that. What I will ask you, though, which I ask everybody who comes on the Legacy Life podcast, is, what do you feel your legacy is? The legacy that you're creating?
I've been thinking a lot about this recently, because Jamal Edwards passed away this week. And just now, before we came on, I was reading a BBC article about him. Obviously, I know a lot about him anyway, but I was looking at the tributes and thinking, wow, like Prince Charles to Richard Branson, to Skepta, to Ed Sheeran, to Sam in our MFF group, who's his teacher, and just like so many people had that positive stuff to say, and it did really make me think about legacy and,
Yeah.
what are people gonna say about you, and when, like, so what people say about me when I pass away, and what impact am I having on the world at the moment?
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I think the passing of Jamal Edwards has really got me, and a lot of people thinking about that, actually. So, for me, it's about, at the fundamental level, I think it's about, as we call MFF, open conversations around fatherhood, to be honest. Like, if I can, through my work, encourage more conversations, and I don't know what those conversations are going to be, or what they're going to be about, or who they're going to be between. But if I can do my bit to encourage those conversations about fatherhood, then I think I've done my job. And so everything that I do is kind of channeled towards that in one way or another, basically.
Yeah.
And yeah, I hope that is the legacy that I leave.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard, isn't it, thinking about legacy? Like,
well, it is as well. And I mean, last year with a group of people, I wanted to write a book, and the book that we wrote, it's a collaborative book, is called Awakening Legacy. And it's different people's stories in that. And when you were talking about, like, we don't know what's going to be awoken in us. And when you became parents, you and your wife became parents, this whole legacy has been unfolding, from that experience, which I think is amazing. The impact that you're having through your book, through your group, through all the work you're doing, the talks you're doing, all of it. And we will never, ever truly know the impact of what we do, because mostly, and I don't know if you find that this with your book as well, most people will read it and they will never reach out, they will never give any feedback as to how it's touched their lives, and they might, it might influence them to go off and do all kinds of things, that you'll never know about. And does it matter? It doesn't really matter either, because it's just it's knowing and trusting that ripple effect happens, that wave of impact happens, and it's great to be alive and on this planet and be able to give and share and be in conversation with people, with each other.
It's amazing. Like, every day I have so much gratitude that I'm able to do this stuff. Like, literally, like, I'm a big believer in purpose, and, like, finding your purpose and finding what it is that, if you believe in God, what God's put you here to do, which I do, and believe that we have a purpose, and it's about, everyone does. And it's about, I guess, being brave enough to pursue that. And it's not always easy, because there are some things that you sacrifice along the way. And I was talking about this with my wife the other day, in terms of, I left my job to do this work. And so you're kind of giving up a lot of security. I wouldn't say financial, because I think you can, the financials can go up and down. It's not necessarily that, but you're giving up a level of security in knowing what's coming up each month, and, routine and whatnot, and you're stepping into the unknown. So,
well, it's perceived security, isn't it?
Well,
because
again,
it is all an illusion, really. And that's a part of our perception of life, isn't it? Because, like, a job mentality versus an entrepreneurial kind of mentality is the job kind of one is the dominant one in our society. A bit like we're talking about dominant ways of looking at masculine and feminine in our society as well. So it feels less secure when you're walking the path that is least trodden.
Exactly. And even, traditionally, you could argue maybe it was secure. People had jobs for life and whatnot. Like, now, that's just not a thing anymore, So there's so much uncertainty in the economy anyway. So definitely now I wouldn't say it. But yeah, I think maybe a step away from the norm. And yeah, for me, it's something that, finding pursuing your purpose can come with that. But if you're able to do it, then amazing things can happen. for you.
Yeah.
And for me, like the amazing things that happen, sometimes they are like, oh yeah, documentary or going on Loose Women and stuff, like those crazy things.
Yeah.
But it could be just actually, I'm finishing work at 2 p.m. today, and I go and pick up my daughter, and I'll be chilling in the park for 3 hours in the summertime. And I'm sure people will look at me thinking, like, what is he doing? What does he do? Like, he's just always out here. But for me, that's as special as anything, like having the freedom.
Yeah.
Just decide on any given day that actually I'm going to go and just, go for a swim and just relax at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday morning, a Tuesday afternoon. Like that sort of stuff for me is success for me,
Yeah.
like inwardly for myself. And then there's outwardly in terms of the change I want to see in the world, the power I believe we all have. Like I think we all have immense power if we lean into it and we accept it and grow into it and we take risks and we go into the unknown and we just do, we have faith and just do the thing and just hope it's going to work. Our book is a big thing about that. So I don't know how long we've got, but I'll just tell a story about the book.
Because I was thinking, we've already been on for an hour, so we've really.
Has it been an hour? Okay, I'll be real quick.
But firstly, before you tell the story, I just want to acknowledge, your courage and your bravery to live into your purpose. I just think, yes. Anyway, tell me a story.
Yeah.
And then we'll finish, honestly, Pete.
We'll finish. Yeah, don't turn off yet. Keep going. But in 2019, I had the idea to get the book and get that together. And so we approached agents, got loads of agents on board, signed with one, went to publishers. They all said that they loved the idea of the book, they loved the writing, they loved the stories, but because myself and the dads aren't famous, that no one's going to care. Right. And no one's going to buy it. So I was like, that's not true. So, but my agent at the time was like, maybe they're right. Maybe you should get famous. And I was like, what? Just run down the street naked? Like, what? Go on Big Brother? I don't understand what you want from me.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Okay, I'll just go get famous then.
Yeah, exactly. Like, oh yeah, give me 2 days. Let's go to Tesco and buy fame, whatever. So I went to the other agent, signed with the other agent, approached publishers again. This is 2020 now. They said the same thing. Love the writing, love the idea, but you're not well known enough. No one's going to care. So we're like, okay, forget it. So for me, I was like, we're going to self-publish. We're going to do a crowdfunder. I'd met a girl at work called Stacey who used to work in publishing who could tell me how to professionally self-publish a book and get it in the major retailers and all that sort of stuff, hardback, everything. So I was like, okay, cool. We need to do a crowdfunder. Planned for it, did our promo video, everything. Day before that crowdfunder, and this is what I think what I was saying in terms of leaning into your purpose and taking that risk and having faith that it's going to work. The day before that crowdfunder, the realization that if this doesn't work, then it's really bad. Like the idea is bad, that MFF will now have such a bad reputation because we tried to launch something and it just flops completely. And maybe I've just been barking up the wrong tree all this time and actually no one's going to care. So for me, it was like kind of like a make or break. If it didn't work, I was going to step away from it all and probably just go and just get a job and just whatever. Or so it was a real test of, do we believe in this? We did the crowdfunder. Yeah. In the first day, we raised £4,000.
Wow.
In a week, we raised £7,000. In 10 days, we'd raised £12,000.
Brilliant.
And that is through no big marketing. That's literally just putting it out on social media, on Twitter, LinkedIn, all that sort of stuff, and asking people for money to support us because we've got this idea. We want to get ordinary dads telling their stories about fatherhood. So then
I think that is amazing. And for people who are listening, if you've got a dream like that, if it hadn't, if nobody had put any money there, it doesn't mean it's a bad idea. Even if it had flopped, it doesn't mean it's a bad idea. It what it means is the money didn't come out in, or it didn't look how you thought it was going to look. But that's, I think in those moments are the times when we have to really dig deep and keep faith. Now, turns out you didn't have to, right? But there is that as well, because we give ourselves these deadlines. When you don't have an external one, like from a job or something, we give ourselves these deadlines, and if it doesn't happen like exactly the way I think it should, then that's it. You know?
And maybe if it didn't work out, we would have just found the money another way and done it. Who knows? But for me at the time, I was feeling like this has to, Anyway, so we released it on the 1st of June, and we had amazing coverage. When we were most TV channels, most newspapers wrote about the book, and it reached the top 10 bestseller list for parenting books on Amazon out of all parenting books in the whole country.
Brilliant.
It was a top 20 Hive, which is independent books distributed to independent bookshops, top 20 in the Hive bestsellers. And this is for all books. So we were in the top 20 with, these established names, whatever. We got the book online in Waterstones, W.H. Smith, Amazon, obviously. And the book did so well. And so for me, it was like, and I tell that story, just like you said, sometimes people aren't going to believe or see the vision of what you've got.
Yeah.
But as long as you know in your heart that it's important, that this is going to help 1, 10, 100, whatever it is, people, and there's people around you who also believe in it as well. It doesn't be loads of people, but a mass of people who also support what you're doing, then you have to just find a way of doing it.
Yeah.
Because you can't rely on other people to validate you. Kanye West did a documentary, and it's on Netflix. There's an amazing scene where he's in the Rockefeller Studios playing All Falls Down, which is an amazing, massive hit, and no one cares. Like, they listen to it, they're like, and then 2 years later, that's one of the biggest songs in the world. So yeah, I think it's just about tunnel vision on what you want to do and finding a way to make it happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And keeping that belief, even when it doesn't look how you think it's going to look,
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh, well, thank you so much. We are going to finish up now, everyone. And if you want to get in contact with Elliot and his organization and all the lovely stuff that he's doing, check out the links below the podcast, or if you're on YouTube, you'll see all his links will be there, so you can get to his website and contact him if you want to connect, get the book, if you're interested in support or any of that lovely stuff that you shared today. Amazing. Great. Thank you so much for coming today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure. I really enjoyed it.
Yay.